You already know the story. In 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo took 24 ordinary college students, flipped a coin, and turned half of them into prison guards. Within 6 days, it was so disturbing he had to shut it down. That's the story in every psychology textbook on Earth. Here's what the textbooks left out. The guards were coached. The prisoners were scripted. The experimenter himself became a character in his own study and then spent the next 50 years making sure you never found out. What you were taught about the Stanford prison experiment is not wrong because someone made a mistake. It's wrong because someone made a choice. And that choice shaped criminal justice policy, prison reform legislation, and the way an entire generation of psychologists understood human nature. This is the Stanford experiment they tried to bury. The year is 1971. America is at war, not just in Vietnam, but inside its own prisons. Riots at Attica, overcrowding in San Quentin, a national debate raging about whether prison brutality was the fault of bad guards or whether the prison system itself turned ordinary people into monsters. Philip Zimbardo, a 38-year-old Stanford psychologist, believed he had a way to find out. He advertised in a Palo Alto newspaper. College students, summer, $15 a day. 75 people applied. He screened them carefully. Psychologically stable, no criminal history, no medical issues. He took 24. A coin flip decided who became guards, who became prisoners. The prisoners were arrested at their homes by real Palo Alto police officers, processed, blindfolded, and delivered to a mock prison built in the basement of Stanford's psychology department. The guards were given wooden batons, mirrored sunglasses, and one instruction: maintain order. What happened next, according to Zimbardo, was one of the most chilling demonstrations in the history of science. Within 24 hours, the guards began to abuse their power. By day 2, the prisoners revolted. The guards crushed it. By day 4, one prisoner had a complete psychological breakdown and had to be released. By day 6, Zimbardo's girlfriend, visiting the experiment for the first time, was so horrified she threatened to leave him unless he stopped it immediately. He shut it down on day 6. The experiment was supposed to run for 2 weeks. The conclusion Zimbardo drew was elegant and terrifying. Ordinary people placed in a powerful situation will become monsters, not because they are bad, because the system makes them that way. It became the most famous psychology experiment in American history. It was used to reform prisons. It was cited in investigations of Abu Ghraib. It was turned into 2 feature films, a best-selling book, and a TED Talk with millions of views. There was just one problem. Almost none of it happened the way he said it did. For decades, the Stanford prison experiment was bulletproof. Zimbardo controlled the narrative completely. He was the researcher, the author, the archivist, and the spokesperson. He owned the footage. He kept the files. The cracks appeared in 2018. A French journalist and documentary filmmaker named Thibault Letexier spent 2 years filing requests, interviewing original participants, and digging through archives that Zimbardo had donated, perhaps prematurely, to Stanford. What he found inside those archives was not what Zimbardo described. He found audio recordings. He found handwritten notes. He found instructions given to the guards before the experiment began that Zimbardo had never disclosed. On the first night of the experiment, a lead experimenter named David Jaffe pulled the guards aside. The recording captured what he told them. He told them to be tough, to be firm, to not let the prisoners have any power. He said, and this is documented verbatim, "We want to see what happens when you take away a prisoner's individuality." That is not a neutral instruction. That is a script. The guards weren't discovering their inner authoritarian through the power of the situation. They were being directed by the experimenters to behave exactly the way the experiment needed them to behave. And it didn't stop there. When Le Texier tracked down original participants and interviewed them on camera, one guard, a man named Dave Eshelman, admitted something that should have ended Zimbardo's career the moment he said it. He said he had consciously decided to play a character. He modeled himself on a brutal Southern prison warden he had seen in a film. He gave himself a persona. He performed cruelty because he thought that was what the experiment needed. His words, "I was kind of running my own experiment." He wasn't overcome by the situation. He was acting.
Here is where it gets darker, because the guards weren't the only ones performing. Philip Zimbardo had assigned himself a role in his own experiment. He was the prison superintendent. He wore the costume. He walked the halls. He was not an observer watching human nature unfold from a safe distance. He was a participant, and a powerful one, who had enormous influence over how every person in that basement behaved. When Le Texier reviewed the audio from prisoner breakdown sessions, moments when distressed participants were begging to be let out, he found something that stopped him cold. Zimbardo wasn't asking them what they were feeling. He was telling them they were fine. One prisoner, known in the records as Prisoner 416, had staged a hunger strike. He refused to eat. He was in visible psychological distress. The recorded response from Zimbardo's team was not concern. It was pressure. They told him that leaving would mean he was weak, that real prisoners couldn't just walk out, that he had made a commitment. A man in psychological crisis being told by an authority figure he trusted that his pain wasn't real enough to stop. And then Zimbardo published a paper saying the situation had transformed ordinary people into abusers. He did not mention that he had been one of them. For 47 years, none of this was in the textbook. You might be thinking, it was one flawed experiment. Science fixes itself. Move on. But here is what the Stanford prison experiment actually did outside the lab. In 2004, when the Abu Ghraib prison abuse scandal broke, American soldiers photographed torturing and humiliating Iraqi prisoners. Zimbardo was called as an expert witness for the defense. His argument, the guards weren't bad people. The situation made them do it. The system was to blame. He used his own experiment as evidence. The defense partially worked. Sentences were reduced. Accountability was diffused. The bad barrel, not bad apples argument, Zimbardo's signature phrase, became the frame through which an entire war crime was processed by the American public. His experiment, built on coached guards and scripted abuse, shaped the legal outcome of one of the most significant human rights cases of the 21st century. And in prisons across America, the situationist argument that the environment determines behavior, not individual choice, had been used for decades to resist reforms that would hold individual guards accountable for individual acts of brutality. The intellectual foundation of that argument was the Stanford prison experiment, a study that, when you read the actual transcripts, shows experimenters coaching subjects to be brutal, a lead researcher playing villain in his own study, and a man in genuine distress being talked out of leaving by the person who was supposed to protect him. The experiment didn't reveal how ordinary people become monsters. It revealed how a powerful person can construct a story, control the footage, seal the archives, write the textbooks, and make an entire world believe something that isn't true. In 2019, Philip Zimbardo responded to Le Texier's findings. He called the criticism superficial. He said the audio recordings were being misread. He said 50 years of citations proved the experiment's validity. He did not address the guard who said he was acting. He did not address the coaching audio. He did not address his own role as prison superintendent. Here's the thing about the Stanford prison experiment that is actually true. Not the version in the textbook, but the real one. It is a perfect demonstration of how authority figures shape reality, how the person controlling the story, the footage, and the archive can make an entire civilization believe something that isn't true. Zimbardo set out to prove that situations control people, and then he controlled every situation in his study to get the result he needed. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that ordinary people become monsters when given power, but that the people who decide what is true, the researchers, the journalists, the institutions, are just as capable of corruption as anyone holding a wooden baton in a basement. The question is not whether you would have been a good guard or a bad one. The question is, who is running the experiment you're already living inside, and have you ever thought to ask? Drop your answer in the comments.